I mean, technically, the season's not over, but it just seems like James Franklin is so defeated at this point.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State football. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. And help me welcome on a very special guest, first time on the show, but it is an extreme privilege to have him on. And it is Andrew Kalista, former local sports TV anchor, but he's been covering Penn State football for 15 years. He is now the host of the Blue White Tailgate podcast, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Andrew, thank you so much for the time today, as we are going to talk about the best case scenario for the situation, with or without Franklin for Penn State. The odds that Franklin and Penn State even part ways, because it seems like that's trending in that direction, but it's definitely not guaranteed. And the vibe check is where we're going to begin. The vibe check of Penn State football in the present, because as I opened up the show, based on the way that Franklin is addressing the media and players as well, their season is actually still alive. Now, Ohio State and Indiana are uphill battles as it is. Don't get me wrong, but in theory, they still have a lot to play for, yet it seems like they're just so defeated at this point with a full schedule remaining.
Tons of things to play for Penn State. That's the most important thing that people need to realize. You think the season's lost, it's not lost, but it's got to turn around really quick. It reminds me of Bobby Knight's season on the brink. There's a lot of things that could go a certain way for Penn State. The vibe check of Penn State Nation, life support, that's what I feel like.
Yeah.
Text messages blowing up, DMs blowing up. Everybody's got to go. I got to tell you, after the game on Saturday, three people had their bags left on the tarmac. Three people had their bags left on the tarmac, getting the old USC Lane Kiffin treatment. A couple hours later, maybe cooler heads prevail, but there's so many rabbit holes to go down on where this season is going. Saturday, I saw a defeated James Franklin walking off the field. That was rough. That was extremely rough. I didn't make the trip out to UCLA, but it was rough watching the videos. And I probably have a different tack on how James Franklin handled the press conference today on Monday.
Okay.
It's hard to say he won, because you can never really win a press conference, especially in this situation. But I thought he handled it well. And the Penn State beat writers get a lot of crap from fans for not hitting James Franklin hard.
Do they now?
Oh, they do. So I know that from being in TV. I could have probably done a better job. I'm a terrible question asker, because I was too much of a pit bull, and I would never get an answer. So I should say pit bull, but like post game for James Franklin, I was too much of a pit bull. Like asking after a 9 overtime loss at Illinois. I made no friends for my questions. Didn't help me. But I'm saying I thought the beat handled the questions really well. I thought they were poignant questions. I'm not mentioning any names because I don't want people to think I have like favorite beat writers or anything like that. They're all my colleagues. But I thought they were poignant. And I thought James answered the question with minimal deflections, contrary to Saturday's. So in that point, he answered them. Changed up a little bit of wording, whether he saw what people are saying about leadership. Todd McShay, I've been saying that. Mike Gross has been saying that. Frank Bonanni on our podcast, I've been saying those same exact things for years in conversation and weeks on the podcast. But I thought the press conference was okay. Now, the content of those answers, you're saying this about Katron Allen. Why is it different in the game? Those are two totally different things, and that's where I get people being, this is a terrible press conference. We're getting nothing out of it. That's always been James's problem. I've talked to previous coaches on previous staffs. They'd always say, we're not quite sure James knows what he's saying in the press conferences all the time, because they don't translate to practicality out on the football field.
And my takeaway from it was, like the defeated passive nature. Like, it's just, well, that happened. We accepted it. We had talked about it. So he was acknowledging it. I will say this. I do commend him for not throwing anybody under the bus. Like, yeah, because I have seen him at points in time where he does deviate and says, kind of throws some subtle jabs and says, well, we could have done this, or we could have been in this situation had we done this. And he's done that in the past. I particularly think back to, kind of the games leading up to Mike Yurcich being fired as a specific example.
Mike Yurcich is, the bus just ran over Mike Yurcich again right behind me. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And this time it's like, okay, so at least the staff is somewhat all on the same page, I hope. But that's kind of my concern as well, because at least the way that I watch that press conference and take it away, it's that the energy is just deflated. I'm not saying that the team and the coaches, because James says, hey, we need to block out the noise and the players need to not focus on the criticism and stuff. I would say that it's got to be a point of motivation or something, because like I said, my takeaway from that was it doesn't seem like you have a season left to be played. Like, you can't right all of these wrongs. Yes, you lost to UCLA and Oregon back to back, and I'm not giving you much of a chance against Ohio State and Indiana, but that doesn't mean that you should believe that either.
They need us against the world mentality, because the noise around the program is literally Mo Bamba pre-Michigan. It's pre-snap Notre Dame 2007. And I will say this, in my opinion, there are too many distractions around the program. The pregame video, nobody cares about preseason rankings. If it's in the video, somebody thought of it. Somebody was paying attention to it. It shouldn't have been there. Pat Kraft walking out. That's not on brand for Penn State football. Or it shouldn't be on brand for Penn State football. Everything is a big production. So, and I tweeted this after the game, when I saw a fan who has a very successful YouTube channel, and I'm drawing a blank on the name right now, but it was in response, and I said, the fan base is sick of being oversold and under-delivered.
Yes.
Penn State right now is a victim of their own internal hype machine, and it's a Trojan horse that's bringing them down. Take the James Franklin's social media page away from the social media manager. Stop with the tweets. That's number one. Block out the noise. Roar Plus influencers all over the field, stop it. Players posing with them, stop it. It's now a business. There is no feel good anymore. It's win, and that's what you're paid to do, and that includes the players.
And that's a great point, because, yeah, come to think of it, Penn State kind of generates its own distractions. Mm-hmm. And that's tough to manage. It really is tough to manage when you have the preseason hype, the preseason expectations. James Franklin, for what it's worth, and you could say it's a criticism, or not. It's just that he is kind of that guy, that he likes the story. He likes the entertainment factor of it. I really do think he likes doing these press conferences for the most part, which is why you have those, the zing answers from time to time, because he does like the theatrics of it. You mentioned how everything is so particular. I mean, it all kind of goes back to him. So just, it's such a strange dynamic right now, because you've lost just about everybody. You're going to get some people that, hey, Penn State can actually go 10-2 and save the season. Mathematically speaking, is that the case? Yes. Is it likely? It's not if you don't act like it. That's my biggest thing, is there doesn't seem to be energy. It doesn't seem like Penn State believes that we're one game away from our season being totally squashed. And are you okay with that? Because we're going to talk about it in the next segment. Maybe Penn State, we don't know it all, but maybe there's already been that conversation of, next season's out of the question, so what does it matter anymore? And that's why there isn't this fight or flight mentality from the team.
I 100% agree with you, and the energy point is also true. I say he didn't lose the press conference, and it was kind of good. The energy being low, I know fans would have wanted to see more, I don't want to say anger, but a little bit more of a spark. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Instead, there was a little bit of fallback with the deflections and things like that. I got to tell you, next season, Penn State fans, you got to kind of put it off, because there's a lot more talent on this roster, proven talent anyway, than what you're going to have next year. So it is this year. And in terms of that energy, it's got to happen. We don't need to see it in a press conference per se. You would like to, but behind closed doors, it has to be us against the world. And if it's not, you're going to have trouble with Northwestern. This is the Northwestern team that beat UCLA. So, transitive property here. Just simple as that.
Yeah, I would not overlook this Northwestern game, especially when, in a sense, the home crowd is going to be against you. So we are going to address that later on in the segment. What's kind of or later on in the show, what the best case scenario is. Before we get there, the odds that any changes are even made, because the fans that have been calling Franklin to be fired now seem like, oh, this is a slam dunk. It's going to happen. I'm finally getting my wish. Might want to pump the brakes there. It's far from a guarantee. We're going to discuss that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIH Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money. Finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. And finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can maximize your investments, increase your savings rate, easily review finances with a partner or a financial advisor, keeping a clear view of your financial health week to week or long term. Don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That is right, 50% off your first year over at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. So the odds that Penn State and Franklin actually part ways, they're there. They've definitely increased since losing to Oregon and then losing to UCLA. That's where this spark really happened here. But it's not a guarantee, and I would still say it's under 50%. Just because it goes from 20 to maybe 35 doesn't mean that it's the most likely outcome. But there's ways that this can happen. But the reason the odds aren't in the favor of the people that say get James Franklin out of town is because, hey, I'll give credit to maybe more so to his agent, but Franklin, he holds all the cards in this situation. Kalista, if he doesn't want to leave Penn State, he doesn't have to, because then he's due $56 million if the Penn State powers that be actually want to push him out.
Yeah, I wish I had a picture of Sandy Barber over my shoulder to kind of say, like, how were these buyout negotiations like so wildly off? James's agent, A+. Sign up. You're a youngster, sign up for that agent when you have the chance. I'm a little bit higher on the odds. And the guys that I do the podcast with Mike Gross, he's a little higher on the odds as well. He has actually said he'd bet money James is not here next year. I'm at 50-50. And for me, a lot depends on how this season goes. Because if the wheels fall off, I don't think James actually goes anywhere. If it gets so bad, I don't think James goes anywhere, because his stock is going to be
who's going to want him? Exactly.
So it's a delicate balance. If Penn State loses maybe one more and it's after Ohio State, or maybe they lose the night game at Kinnick and then lose to Ohio State, bounce back, get the rest of the W's, then there's still going to be things that his agent and James could point to and say, listen, it just wasn't it. And James is going to want to change the scenery because he has the low buyout, so he could leave on his own accord. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if he's not going to get the offer that he wants, stick around, get your money, and then next year's buyout is what, $49 million, $45 million, whatever it goes down to, because then that is still on the hook, have a chance to kind of like rebuild it up. But I don't see next year as one of those rebuilding up the credibility, looking for a contract if you're James Franklin. Because as I said, if you don't have linebacker talent to replace one linebacker this year, what are you going to do when you have to replace DDS, Zane Durant, AJ Harris? There's tons of different elements for next season. And again, it's not proven, but I'm 50-50, depending on how the season finishes here for the Nittany Lions, what they accomplish or don't accomplish. And then James Franklin, more than likely moving on his own accord to another school.
That's the wrench in all of this, because we mapped out the equation where James Franklin, again, has the leverage. It's up to him. It is his decision. It's not Penn State saying, hey, we're in control of this situation, because unfortunately they're not. And this isn't Pat Kraft's doing or anything. But it's the domino effect. It's Sandy Barber and previous, and I'm not saying, oh, this is all her fault, but it's so convenient. It's so timely with all of it, because you have NIL. So now you crowdfund and get all the resources and ask donors to, fund James Franklin's project, fund his team, because they're going to the championship and everything. So you ask the donors for that. You also ask the donors for help with the stadium renovation project. It's one thing to supply, give or take, $20 million for an NIL roster, and maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's 10 to 15, whatever. That's still a lot of money that I'm not trying to be dismissive of. But it's the stadium renovation project where it's $700 million and you're getting $25 million donation increments left and right. Okay, and now you're going to go back to those same people that have helped you with those larger projects to say, let's fire the guy that we just asked you to support. That's why I put the odds lower, because it depends on what Franklin wants to do. None of that is guaranteed. It's that Penn State is in no position to pay a $56 million buyout right now.
No, and you have to think about this. This is a business. It's strictly business anymore, and nothing more. And the days, I think, are gone of massive buyouts being paid out like Jimbo Fisher. Like Texas A&M, I think, would have been better served if they would have realized what fully was coming down the road here to keep that, $77 million. Could do a lot of damage with that in Texas, my friend. So we just went through a press conference with Pat Kraft before the season talking about where to grow revenue and where to get more money from. I can tell you right now, you're putting $700 million into the stadium. Football was supposed to fund a lot of projects to try and find that extra revenue and everything else. I know I've been banging on the drum for a basketball facility of $27 million for Mike Rhodes to try to attract recruits, because
nice, yeah.
Outside of TV revenue, the basketball program's making no money. You could easily jack up the money to benefit all of athletics and basketball right there if you could turn that into a more profitable enterprise. And the way you do that is with NIL for basketball. I think they're like 16th in the Big Ten, and also with a basketball facility for a one donation that's going into a $700 million stadium. And you got to fill those seats. That's why it's so important. James Franklin has to win. The moves that Pat Kraft has to make has to be looking at 5 to 10 years down the road, not right now, satisfying the bloodlust that is probably the warmest that it's been since after James Franklin lost to Pitt in 2016.
No, precisely that. And I wasn't in the media at that time. I was still a student, but definitely there was, but that's the thing. I was covering student media, and I can remember those conversations. It was how many columns can we write about Franklin and Penn State parting ways because this isn't working out? That's the exact same kind of setup as it is right now. It's column after column, but last time it was mostly local. Right, it's local and regional. This time, it's national. You see it everywhere. And I don't want to just throw out outlets left and right, but I know that more national media outlets are paying attention to this closely, saying that they're beating the drum that, hey, Penn State should move on. Regional outlets, you're right, Penn State should move on. And now more of the fans, Penn State should move on. Here's where I stand in this situation, because I don't like advocating for people to get fired. I don't like advocating for players to get benched, because they do a job that, I fully don't. And I admitting that as a podcast host, but I don't fully comprehend some of the stuff they do on a day-to-day basis. I'm not afraid to admit that. At the same time, though, when you dub this roster the best personnel group, the coaching staff and the roster, you went on the record and said this, James. the best personnel group that you've ever had in your coaching career, and then you lose to the worst FBS team in college football. That is a fireable offense, but you have the $56 million buyout that protects you from these kinds of mistakes.
Yeah, no, and 100%. And when the most worrying part is, if you're a Penn State fan, is if Penn State doesn't make a move or James Franklin is here and the ship isn't righted, is Penn State's not sexy. Recruits are going to hear that. And then there's a drop off and then there's a delay because the recruits are paying attention to the national media. The recruiting gurus that are out there and talking, listen, they're affiliated with schools. Who are you considering? I'm considering these schools. Why? Just ask Derek Williams when he said he was considering Penn State, what like some of these recruiting gurus were saying to him. Why? So it all goes back. And Joe Paterno's long gone. I don't know if Joe Paterno's name is ever going to be at Beaver Stadium in any form of capacity outside of those bricks that are stuck in outside the All Sports Museum. But I have a hard time imagining him ever saying something like the best roster, this and that, because the expectations just go through the roof. And that's where I got the overselling line. And, Paterno was famous for always coming in the media and say, if we don't play good this week, we're going to get lit. Didn't matter if it was Northern Illinois, Temple, Coastal Carolina, or Jim Tressel, Ohio State, Lloyd Carr's Michigan. So that's kind of where I think James gets himself in trouble, and the Penn State hype machine gets him in trouble as well.
So what is the best case scenario of all of this? Because it doesn't really seem like 8-4 doesn't do anything. 9-3 doesn't do anything because you lost what you were going after. Big Ten title, national title, college football playoff even, and then even still, what is the 2, 3, 4, 5-year outlook for Penn State at this point in time, with or without James Franklin? Well, we're going to discuss that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. It's quick. You can make a lineup in under a minute. One of the best parts now is PrizePicks just added stacks. So if you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rushing yards, or touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with just one click. And the new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. The best case scenario for Penn State is that I do lean on the fact that Penn State, with or without James Franklin, is still always going to be just in that, hey, they're solidly in tier 2. They're going to be 10-2 one way or another. Maybe it's not this year. Maybe they end up finishing 9-3 and 8-4, which is kind of my expectation at this point with Ohio State and Indiana. So short term, best case scenario, like real best case scenario, if we're talking storybook ending, they circle the wagons. They somehow beat Ohio State and Indiana. I'm not even discounting Nebraska or Iowa at this point, especially since it's a night game at Kinnick now. Go figure, just kind of adds insult to everything else that Penn State's dealing with. But Penn State does go 10-2. And they get to the college football playoff. I don't see them winning more than a game at that point as an at-large team. Maybe they end up hosting as an 8th seed because of just a lucky break of some sort. But that is truly the best case scenario. They get a home playoff game. They do the unthinkable. They beat Ohio State and they beat Indiana. But it's more likely that they finish 8-4. They are better than Iowa, I think. They are better than Nebraska, I think. But the ones that I kind of chalk up as, you're really going to have to convince me otherwise. Ohio State and Indiana, that's lost 3-4 right there. And the season's kind of washed as it is.
Yeah, I mean, storybook ending, yes, they could go 10-2 and somehow make a run. I think best case scenario for Penn State, realistically, for me, is 9-3 and a competitive game that shows a lot of grit, a lot of fight, at Ohio State. And that would probably calm, I think, a lot of things around the program and give the fan base, I don't want to say hope's the wrong word, but it'll just cool them off a little bit. It's such a hard thing to answer, like where Penn State's going to be in 2 to 5 years, because right now is such an unknown. I do think on Saturday against the Wildcats, Penn State fans will be able to find out a lot of stuff. You'll know if this team is actually in it to win it and what they are actually playing for, even if it's individuals. You'll find out what is their go-to, because guys reach down and they find out who they are. So Saturday, first half of the game, you're going to find out a lot about Penn State's football team. I'm going to say best case scenario is, and for the fan base, 9-3, competitive game against Ohio State. And that leaves multiple options on the table for Penn State and James Franklin coming up in the offseason to see what final direction this program is going to take, and if the James Franklin era is actually going to come to a close.
If Penn State ends up and James Franklin, they end up staying together, they don't part ways, you're obviously going to have a disgruntled fan base or just an exhausted fan base. I don't think it's, you do have people that are angry and have been calling for this for quite some time, but it's kind of the apathy of it. Is I just see fans that are just like, I'm exhausted. At 10-2, heartbreaking losses, new ways to lose these close games. It's one thing to just, you lose to Ohio State, you lose to Michigan, but a double overtime thriller against Oregon, a last second interception against Notre Dame when you could have tied or went ahead with the game-winning drive. Come on, it hurts. I'm exhausted of this, but Penn State will still be in a position to, because James Franklin, if he still wants to be at Penn State, he has this going for him. Next season's schedule is it's all cupcakes. The entire schedule, it's Northwestern, it's Rutgers, it's Maryland, and I know I'm discounting teams that I don't know would be what they are actually going to look like at the end of the day. But on paper, it is very realistic to think that Penn State, with the roster turnover that it has, and James Franklin keeps the coaching staff together, he could make the argument that, well, this season was a fluke. I can actually go 12-0 next year with the same support.
I think 12-0 with, again, the unproven talent is kind of a stretch. And I don't want to discount Rutgers. Greg Schiano, Penn State ties. Hey, boys, you weren't good enough to be recruited to Penn State. You could get that coach fired. Greg Schiano is a master of firing guys up. I don't think anybody does more with less than Greg Schiano, at Rutgers. First trip, second trip as well. Apathy is a great word. Exhausted are two words on point. Tip of the cap for you, Zach, for mentioning those. But it's so tough. It really is.
And then if Penn State does go in a different direction, okay, because I think things will just stay status quo, is that, hey, James Franklin is well liked in the coaching sphere. He's able to get, Jim Knowles is still a good coordinator. I'm not really sure what's going on with Andy Kotelnicki, but there are a lot of really good assistants on this staff that he's able to get to State College. Jim Knowles, Stan Drayton, and keep Anthony Poindexter in town. That does take, that's a testament to James Franklin. Yeah. So I think we'll just see more of the same, that, hey, 10-2, maybe you win a game you're not supposed to, but again, it is exhausting. Now, the best case scenario for Penn State, if James Franklin were to go into retirement or go get another job, whatever that situation, whatever that timeline looks like, Penn State's still Penn State, so they're going to be able to find a competent, capable head coach, but who knows what the results would be right out of the gate. I would like to think with a strong NIL foundation, which Penn State has a better situation. You also have the transfer portal. So it's not this, you got to go on a 5-year plan because the only way to succeed was through high school football recruiting. You don't have that anymore. You can get a roster turnaround in as quickly as 1 season, realistically speaking, 2 seasons. So Penn State, if they do go through some turbulence, if they move on from Franklin, I think the max window, if you really ace the hire, who that is at the end of the day, I'm not entirely sure. But in 2 years, Penn State could be back where they take somewhat of a down year, and then in year 2 with a new name, new face, get back to competing for a Big Ten title and a solid spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah, some of the names you see like floating around on social media, it's kind of funny, like Nick Saban in a Penn State.
Gruden.
Yeah, John Gruden. I mean, you do have to laugh about it. Back in the day, Rick Neuheisel was at the tavern just to be an offensive coordinator at Penn State. That was always one of the fun rumors. And the old Steelers head coach, who now I'm drawing a blank right on. It's like, oh, volleyball, he's coming to Penn State and to coach. I mean, you remember all those, as a student and kind of like growing up and stuff like that. But let me say what the worst thing is for James Franklin. If they somehow circle the wagons, James cannot, there could be no, not that James pounds his chest, but there could be no walking around and strutting. That would turn a lot of fans off. He kind of has to own the situation. Hey, we came together, we got it. Because if they do go 10-2 and somehow, run the table or make a run in the college football playoff, it's a little bit different than Ohio State's, loss at Oregon, lost in a rivalry game. You got blitzed by the worst Power 4 team in the country with zero answers. There has to be some inside reflection, and I'm at a loss for the perfect word I'm looking for. But James, I don't want to say tone it down because that would be wrong, but he has to reflect for the fan base at himself of the projection of how he wants the program to be perceived to satisfy some of the fans, even if there is a turn of the round. Because if not, it's right back to square one as soon as the loss happens the very next year.
No, precisely that. And that's a great way to sum it all up, because we talk about the self-imposed distractions, and that's just it. You're not out of the water yet. You lose one game, your theoretical season of the goals that you had set, because they're still on the table, you could jeopardize those by, puffing your chest after a hypothetical Ohio State win, just to have it all come crashing down if you don't do the same thing against Indiana, or worse, Nebraska and Matt Rule, who's a Penn State guy.
A college guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's really not going to go over well, and a great point to finish up this podcast, which I thought was a great conversation, brings a lot of perspectives together about this situation that is going to carry on for the rest of the season, regardless if Penn State wins or loses or what they do. Yes, it will be quieted, but it's not really going to go away unless Penn State goes 10-2. I thank each and every one of you for joining us on this show. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. A big thank you to Andrew Kalista for joining me as a special guest. And hopefully this is not just the first and last time, but we can have many more conversations like this. Kalista, thank you so much for joining me here. Appreciate the time, appreciate the perspective as well.
Hey, man, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And the best thing about talking about all this, there's so many hypotheticals. It's like which one's going to play out. And you could always say, I nailed it or I missed it. I was close. And that's what makes college football really great.